Hello everybody and welcome to today's top 5 board gaming video about questing. Before I get started, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at all of my various social media pages as well as my Patreon page. On all of those, you'll be able to interact with myself and my channel in a whole bunch of really cool ways. So moving right into today's topic of questing. This means that you're going somewhere and doing something, whether it's because you got a card that says that you have to, or it's something that's standard on the board game board, something along those lines. It really plays into the immersion, typically with a fantasy sort of spin to it and all sorts of other different things like that. That said, going on a quest, so to speak, is a rather ubiquitous thing in board gaming, and you guys know I love to hear from you, so please let me know any and all of your thoughts in the comments below. What are your favorite games that involve questing? Why do you like them? And all of that great stuff. That said, we're going to move right into my number 5. At number 5, I've got Firefly the board game. The tagline itself: find a crew, find a job, keep flying. Just tells you everything that you need to know with regard to the questing. If you're unfamiliar with the Firefly universe or the Firefly board game, one of my favorite aspects to this particular game is the morality system. All of the jobs that you can find have some kind of moral aspect to them. You can have morally reputable or you can have morally good. And that's one thing I really appreciate about the questing idea in this game, is that you have sort of the good-bad reputation aspect that you really don't see in a lot of board games. That said, it's a little bit lower on the list because most of the quests are really similar in terms of you go, you get something, and you bring it somewhere else. Not necessarily a bad thing, but a little bit of more variety would have been nice. Either way, Firefly the board game, my number 5. At number 4, I've got Shadows over Camelot, the Arthurian Legends game that has the quests right on the board for you. Whether you're finding the Holy Grail, getting Excalibur, fighting the Black Knight, finding Lancelot's armor, or any number of other quests, there is a lot for everybody to do. It's a quality co-op where everybody has to split up and sort of do whatever they're able to best, and it just makes the game function in a really interesting and unique way where you can't ignore any particular quest, but at the same time you also have to watch out for the traitor that might be among you, and of course you have to prioritize finishing specific quests before others. That said, it's a little bit lower on this list simply because the quests are all on the board for you. You really don't have any choice in what you can do. You can alternate where you're going to go, when you're going to go, that kind of thing, but the quests themselves are always going to be identical. The game itself, still very good, lots of fun to play. Shadows over Camelot, my number 4. At number 3, I've got the Witcher Adventure board game based off of the video games and books of the same name. This is another one similarly to Firefly where everything you need to know is in the title, the adventure game. They do a wonderful job of taking the world of The Witcher and putting it into a board game. You've got quest cards that you have to go out and complete. You've got all of your favorite characters from the video games that you can play as and interact with, and on top of that you just have a wonderful retelling of the stories of the Witcher series. That said, it's in the middle of this particular list simply because if you're not familiar with The Witcher itself and some of the characters in it and how they interacted and some of like the sort of in-jokes that you end up seeing, then you probably won't appreciate it as much as other people. But that said, the mechanics are actually surprisingly good for a game that came from what was originally a video game and subsequently book IP, which is relatively uncommon, and it's a pretty solid game. So if you're interested, I highly recommend it. The Witcher Adventure game, my number 3. At number 2, I've got Lords of Waterdeep for 2 major reasons: Dungeons and Dragons. Waterdeep is a city contained within the D&D realms, and this is an example of a board game that does a wonderful job of taking a different format of a tabletop RPG in this case and putting it into a board game form. In this case, in the form of a worker placement, resource management, and questing game where you are undergoing territory control and doing all sorts of really cool stuff. I love the variety of quests that you have in here, where a lot of them are related to how you manage your resources, where you go on the board, which places you control, the areas that are out there, and how everything is sort of shifting around. There is a lot of really good replayability, and the quests themselves keep things relatively fresh. That said, I do highly recommend playing this with the expansion, which unfortunately I don't have, because it adds a lot more gameplay and it makes it that much more replayable as well. But regardless, Lords of Waterdeep, the base game on its own, is wonderful. It's nice because you don't necessarily need to know the D&D lore, because these are characters that even I'm only vaguely familiar with, but it's still a great mechanical game. Lords of Waterdeep, my number 2. At number 1, I've got Big Daddy Descent. That's right, one of very, very few board games that actually requires a game master in order to play. The reason that I absolutely love this game as a questing game is because you've got the GM involved, you've got a campaign mode, and so you are constantly going on and finding new quests to explore. It really feels like an RPG video game experience, which is where we see a lot of somewhat arbitrary but still really fun questing abilities. So it's great, it's really fun, it's a difficult game to get to the table. You need a decent number of people, and you really need a commitment like a lot of other games of this style. That said, it's wonderfully done. The miniatures are really good, the components are all great. Like I said, the quests have a great variety and they're a lot of fun. The campaign mode is tremendously rewarding just as a gaming experience overall. Descent, by far my number 1 questing game. Well, everybody, that's going to be it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video on my 5 favorite questing games. Again, this is kind of a ubiquitous mechanic, but at the same time, it's not really, because when I think of quests, I think of, you are now destined to go and do the thing, and you need to go here and do the thing. And it's like, yeah, in all board games, you play something, you do something, but it's not necessarily a quest. It's more of just mechanically. So I'm really curious what you guys have to say. What are your favorite questing games and why? What makes you really enjoy them? Do you like replaying them? If so, or any other thoughts, you guys know I love to hear them. Put everything in the comments below. Thank you so very much for watching this. I hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.